Hello everyone and welcome to the new session of the lecture series, and today's topic is plant growth and development. So this lecture is totally NCERT based. Alright, means all the topics are covered from the NCERT book and we'll do the revision of all the topics today. Okay, and this lecture is the continuation of the previous lecture. Alright, so in the previous lecture we have already studied about the definition of growth, the phases of growth, okay, and then we studied how growth can be expressed mathematically, and within this we studied about the arithmetic and the geometric growth. All right, so today we will start with the quantitative measurement of growth, how growth can be measured quantitatively. So within this we will study about the absolute growth rate and the relative growth rate. So let's talk about the absolute growth rate now. So how can we define absolute growth rate? It is the total growth per unit time. Okay, whenever we talk about the rate, we have to talk about the time. Okay, so it is growth per unit time. Or you can also say it is the actual growth of the leaf, okay, which is expressed in centimeter square. Okay, so this is known as the absolute growth. Okay, suppose the initial size, you can say, or the length, okay, or you can also say length of the leaf was 10 centimeter square. Okay, and later what happens? The final size or length is 15 centimeter square. Okay, so what will be the absolute growth? Okay, absolute growth, you can write it as AG will be 5 centimeter square. Alright, so this is the actual growth of the leaf expressed in centimeter square. Now let's talk about the relative growth rate. During relative growth rate, what happens? Okay, or how can we define the relative growth rate? The growth of the given system. Okay, any leaf, you can say, or root, or any other organ of the plant, you can say stem. Okay, so growth of the given system per unit time. Okay, per unit initial parameter means the initial value. Okay, the initial value, that's why it is known as relative. Whenever we talk about relative, means we are comparing it with something. Okay, there is a comparison, so we are comparing it with the initial value. That's why relative growth rate is defined as the growth of the given system per unit time per unit initial parameter. Okay, or you can say simply that growth rate relative to the initial size. Okay, we have to consider the initial value always during relative growth rate. So this is the formula of relative growth rate, growth per unit time. Okay, which is also known as absolute growth. Okay, you can write this as the absolute growth. Okay, divided by the initial size, okay, into 100. This is the formula of the relative growth, or this is how mathematically it can be expressed. Now this is the figure given in the NCERT book. Okay, so what they have given you? They have given you leaf A and leaf B. Okay, and this figure represents the comparison of absolute and the relative growth rate. Now you can see here the leaf A grows to, okay, in size or length, and the final, okay, is the leaf A1, and this is the leaf B, okay, and it grows, okay, and we have represented the final condition or the final leaf as B1. So what happens here, if we talk about the absolute growth rate, which is growth per unit time, so this is the absolute growth rate. Okay, here it is 5 centimeter, final was 10, okay, 10 centimeter square minus 5 centimeter square, which is 5 centimeter square. Okay, so this is 5 centimeter square, which is the absolute growth. Again, if we talk about the leaf B, which grows from, okay, B to B1, here this is the absolute growth. Here again, initially, okay, final was 55, final size or the final length of the leaf, okay, if we talk about B1, okay, minus 50, okay, B, leaf B. So what is the absolute growth rate here? Again, 5 centimeter square. Alright, from 50, okay, there was increase of 5 centimeter square, okay, and the final value is 55 centimeter square. So this is absolute growth. Okay, so absolute growth is same in both the leaves. Alright, but when we compare the final size with the initial size, okay, when we have to calculate the relative growth rate. So first let's calculate the relative growth rate in leaf A. Alright, again you have to remember the formula. Absolute growth divided by the initial value or the initial length or the initial size, okay, into 100. So absolute growth here was 5. Alright, and what is the initial value in leaf A? Again 5. Alright, into 100, which is give us the value of 100%. So here relative growth is 100% from 5 to 10. Okay, now if we talk about the relative growth in leaf B, so here what happens? This is the 5 centimeter square is the absolute growth, but the initial value here was, okay, initial size was 50 here. Alright, then again we have to multiply it with 100. So relative growth is 10 here, okay, only 10% growth, okay, from 50 to 55. Okay, here you can see in leaf A it was 100%, means the leaf size has, or you have seen it has doubled. Okay, but here there is only 10% increase. Okay, that's why relative growth is very important to consider. We have to consider relative growth rate, okay, when we are talking about the growth rate. Now let's talk about the conditions required for the growth of the plant. Alright, so first is the presence of water. Alright, so what is the role of water? Water imparts turgidity to the cells. Now what is turgidity? Means it makes the cell swollen, okay, and distended. Alright, whenever the cell absorbs water, okay, it becomes turgid, means it becomes swollen and distended, okay, and because of this turgidity there is a cell growth, or you can say there is a elongation of cells, which is known as growth. There is elongation of cell, okay, which is considered as cell growth, or growth you can say. Okay, so water is very important. And what is the other role of water? It plays a vital and a crucial role for enzymatic activity. Now you already know that lot of biochemical reaction takes place, or there are a lot of biochemical pathways which are going on within the plant, and these biochemical reactions are catalyzed by enzymes, okay, means they are enzymatic reactions, okay, and to carry on these reactions, and okay, water is required. All right, so water is very important for the growth of the plant. Now next is the oxygen. So oxygen, now we know, is very important for the respiration. Okay, now what is respiration? Respiration is it is a metabolic pathway. Okay, it is a metabolic pathway which involves the breakdown of organic compounds. Or you can say what happens during respiration, there is a breakdown of the complex organic compounds into the simpler or the simple organic compounds. All right, and this process requires oxygen. Okay, and what happens during the respiration? Energy is generated, okay, which is crucial for the growth. And during this, what happens? You can write simple organic compounds are produced plus energy is produced in the form of ATP. Okay, and this energy can be used for various cellular processes, okay, like you can say signaling, active transport, or it can be also used in the movement and locomotion. Energy can also be used in reproduction. All right. Now, next is the availability of the nutrients. All right. So, nutrients are of two types. We know macro and the micronutrients. So, both macro and micronutrients are imperative, means they are vital. They are vital as energy sources, and it is also required for the protoplasm synthesis. What is protoplasm? Cytoplasm plus nucleus. All right, so nutrients, availability of nutrients is very important for carrying out the growth. Okay, or you can say for optimum growth. Now, some more factors are also responsible for, okay, the optimum growth. Okay, and these factors are temperature, salinity, light, and gravity. So if we talk about temperature, so now we know that every plant, okay, they germinate and grow. The plant, they germinate means the seeds germinate and they grow at optimum temperature. Okay. And you can also say enzymes also worked at optimum temperatures. Okay. So temperature is very important factor. Okay. And it influences the growth of the plant. Next is salinity. Salinity, what does salinity means? It means the concentration of salt in water, you can say, or you can say in the soil. All right. So the concentration of the salt is very important for the, okay, growth of the plant, especially in the fresh water. Okay. If we talk about the freshwater plants, so what happens if the salinity is very high? So these plants will not grow in high salt conditions. Only halophytes can grow. And what does do high concentration of salt? It affects the absorption of the nutrients. Okay, thereby affecting the growth of the plants. All right. Now, next factor is light. So, light, you know, is very important for photosynthesis. All right. And what does photosynthesis produce? It produces carbohydrates such as glucose. Alright, so light is again very important. Then we have the gravity. So gravity, what does gravity decide? It decides why it is important for the growth. So you can say because it decides the orientation of stem and roots. Alright. So these were the role of these factors. Now next is the differentiation. Let's study about this term, differentiation. Alright. So differentiation refers to the process by which unspecialized cells, you have to remember this, unspecialized or undifferentiated cells, they undergo both structural and functional modification. So what are structural modification? Change in the cell wall, or you can say change in the shape of the cell, okay, or you can say change in the protoplasm, okay, and there is change in the function also, function of the cells also, okay. So differentiation is a process where the unspecialized cells undergo these changes, leading to the development of specialized cells. Okay, so unspecialized cells are converted into specialized cells due to differentiation, and these specialized cells, okay, have distinct characteristics, okay, and they have specific roles and functions within a multicellular organism. All right. So simply you can say, like, if there is a mass of undifferentiated cells, okay, suppose the cells are meristematic, they are undifferentiated. After differentiation, they will become specialized, okay, they will become specialized. And what does specialized means? Means they have now specific roles or function, okay, and have specific or distinct characteristic. Distinct character. Alright. So, example of differentiation we can see. The cells derived from the root apical and the shoot apical meristem. This you already know, root apical meristem present at the tip of the root. Okay, whereas shoot apical meristem present at the in the shoots. Okay, both these meristem contains meristematic cells. Okay. So let's talk about the root apical meristem and shoot apical meristem first. Okay, so what happens? These cells contain undifferentiated cells, meristematic cells they contain. Okay, now these cells will undergo differentiation. Okay, cells in the root apical meristem and shoot apical meristem will undergo differentiation, and what will happen? It leads to the formation of three kinds of cell. First is epidermal tissue, which forms the epidermis. Okay, we have the epidermal tissue. Then we have the ground tissue. Okay, just beneath the epidermal tissue. What is the role of ground tissue? Storage and conduction, or transport. Okay, and then we have the vascular tissue. Okay, xylem and phloem. Alright, so the cells which were undifferentiated in the meristem, they differentiate and they acquire specific characteristic and specific roles. Okay, now these cells have specific roles. Okay, vascular tissues are involved in conduction. of water and food. Okay, epidermal cells will form the epidermis, ground tissue, again transport and storage role. All right, so and second is the cambium. Cambium are of two types. First is the vascular cambium and second is the cork cambium. So again, similarly, these cells also contain the undifferentiated cells, okay, or you can say they contain meristematic cells which can differentiate to form specialized cells. All right, vascular cambium will give rise to what? It will give rise to xylem and phloem. Okay, and cork cambium also, okay, it forms some of the part of the, okay, of the bark of the stem. Now, sometimes what happens, let's talk about de-differentiation now. Okay, sometimes what happens, the living differentiated cells, okay, means the mature cells. Okay, differentiated cells are also known as the mature cells. Okay, in mature cells, they lose the ability to divide. Okay, if the cell is mature or it is differentiated, then what happens? It have lost the ability to divide. And it has acquired a specific role and characteristic. So sometimes what happens, some of the living differentiated cell regain the capacity to divide. All right, under certain conditions. All right, and then these cells are then known as de-differentiated cells, and the process is known as de-differentiation. Okay, so initially what we had unspecialized cells. Okay, unspecialized cells. These cells undergo differentiation, okay, to form mature cells with specific function and characters. Sometimes what happens, these cells regain the ability to divide. Okay, they can divide again depending on certain conditions. And then what will happen? They will again become de-differentiated. Okay, this process is known as de-differentiation. Okay, the cells will be again de-differentiated. Okay, one of the example is the interfascicular cambium and the core cambium. Okay, they develop from fully differentiated parenchyma cells. All right, so this is the example of de-differentiation, formation of the interfascicular cambium, okay, and the core cambium. So this cambium, I've already told you, the cambium contains meristematic cells. Okay, they contain meristematic cells which are undifferentiated or unspecialized. Okay, so from the differentiated parenchyma cells, undifferentiated cells are formed in the interfascicular and the core cambium. Okay, another example is, you can give a zygote. Okay, so now let's talk about the next term, which is redifferentiation. Okay, so what happens when the cells again lose the capacity to divide? Okay, so what happens? Then again they become redifferentiated and they become mature, and now they can perform specific functions. All right, so first we have differentiation, okay, which leads to the formation of mature cells. differentiation. Okay, then we have which leads to the formation of mature cells with specific functions. These mature cells can sometimes gain the ability to divide, and they again become de-differentiated. Okay, and then again what happens? They can again lose the ability to divide. And what happens if they lose the ability to divide? They will again become, okay, mature cells are again produced. Okay, and this process is known as redifferentiation. Okay, and mature cells are produced. Here you can write gain the ability to divide depending on the conditions of the organism. Okay. Now you're talking about the growth now. Now let's talk about the development. What is development? Okay. So development is simply, how can we define? It is a term that includes all the changes that an organism goes through during its life cycle from germination of the seed to the senescence. Okay, senescence ultimately leads to the death of the organism. Okay, so all the changes, okay, that an organism grows from the germination, like in plants, if we talk about, we can say germination of the seed, okay, till the senescence. All right, so this is known as development. So this is the figure showing you the sequence of the developmental process in plant cell. Okay, so now you can see initially we had a meristematic cell, okay, which is undifferentiated. So what happens? Plasmic growth takes place here. Okay, now what is plasmic growth? Plasmic growth is the expansion or the elongation of the cell, okay, which leads to the cell division, okay, and then later differentiation of the cells. Okay, so what is plasmatic growth? Plasmatic growth, it is the elongation of cells, okay, that lead to the cell division, or you can write that lead to the division of the cells, or you can also say prepares the cells for division and differentiation. All right, so here you can see again meristematic cell, there was plasmatic growth, okay, there was expansion or elongation of the cell which leads to cell division and differentiation. Okay, differentiation also known as maturation. The cells are maturing, they are gaining specific roles, and finally a mature cell is produced. Okay, these mature cells have specific function, okay, and it has a specific character also. Then when the cells become mature, then then in the end what will? It will follow the senescence pathway. And senescence ultimately leads to the death of the organism. All right, so this is known as development. So this was all for today's lecture. We'll continue with the rest of the topics in the next session. Thank you very much for listening.